Welcome back to PC-98 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-98, the most popular Japanese PC series of the early 1990s. I'm Mr. Jakes. All 4 games in the Brandish series originated on the PC-98. A few months ago, I did the first one from 1991, so today, moving right along, let's talk about the sequel, which didn't come out until 1993, Brandish 2. The Planet Buster. And like the first game, the second was also ported to the Super Famicom. However, it never saw a release outside Japan on the SNES. If you do want to play the game in English today, luckily there are fan translations for not only the Super Famicom version, but also the PC-98 version. The PC-98 patch is actually for the slightly updated release, Brandish 2 Renewal. And you may remember that in my Brandish 1 video, I ended up playing through the renewal version of Brandish 1, since I wanted the stereo FM sound and hard drive support. In the case of Brandish 2 though, the original version already had both these features, so this original release version here is good enough for me. The renewal version actually does have slightly improved music. All they did was add in the rhythm channels from the YM2608 sound chip, which they didn't use at all in the original version. See if you can hear the difference. All the music you'll be hearing in this video from here on is from the original, non-renewal version. There are a number of other small differences between the two versions, mostly bug fixes, and I'll point out a couple of them later in the video. So let's take a look at the packaging. I'll slide it out here. Here's the manual, which is again in full color. Then you have the starting manual, which as you'd expect, explains how to start the game and also how to install it if you're using a hard drive. The Legend of Xanadu was just about to be released when this game came out, and the rest of the catalog shows Falcom's recent games at the time. In the back there are also Falcom goods. Here's the form to order them directly from Falcom. Man, there's a lot of stuff in here. Falcom Music Catalog shows the CDs they had available at the time. And I don't really know why this is in here. Falcom had a partnership with the publishing company Kadokawa Shoten. Here's a survey card. And this is supposed to look like the ancient script translation book which appears in the game. Inside is a glossary of terms, which mostly serves as a list of items, equipment, and enemies. Here's a sticker for the backup of the program disk, which you need to create if you want to play directly from the floppy disks. The game has a total of 6 disks. The installer is contained on disk 0, the master program disk. Once we get it going, it's pretty simple and is similar to other Falcom PC-98 install programs, asking you to insert each disk so it can copy over all the data to the hard drive. Once it's finished, we can navigate to the newly created folder BR298 and run br2.exe. The game actually doesn't run on DOS 6, which is what I normally use, but PC-98 owners can easily get around this using a popular utility called setver.exe. So Brandish 2 has a main menu, even in the original release, and boy, it looks kinda sad compared to the renewal version. The music here is the same as in Brandish 1 Renewal, and in my Brandish 1 video I think I misspoke when I called this the Renewal menu BGM. It would probably be more correct to say that this is the Brandish 2 menu BGM, which they also used in Brandish 1 Renewal. Brandish 3 has completely different menu music in both the original and renewal versions. Here you can adjust the video and sound settings, but you should be able to just leave them on the defaults. The disk utility menu is useful for backing up your current save data, just in case, heaven forbid, you end up soft locking yourself or something and you need to go back to an earlier save. Anyway, let's start by watching the opening. So first of all, some of these still graphics in the opening really feel like they could use some animation, and they actually did end up adding some in the Super Famicom version. The opening story of Brandish 2 is extremely hard to follow. There are tons of details you need to know for it to make sense, and the text here is too vague and poetic and leaves out a lot of those details. On top of that, sometimes it shows graphics in the background unrelated to what it's currently talking about, like this one of Aris fighting the end boss of Brandish 1. Fortunately, I decided to read the long Japanese story in the manual, so you don't have to. It begins with a prophet named Benedict, who's made a long journey to the kingdom of Bundevia, where Brandish 2 takes place. There he remarks that it used to be a beautiful kingdom, but thanks to its power-hungry ruler, King Badorer, it's now become a desolate place where even the once lively fishing port has gone quiet. He notices the island prison of Balsados, which the king had erected there as a display of power. Anyone who shows any sign of disrespect to the king is immediately sent there, and it is said that now even many innocent folks are imprisoned within. The prophet Benedict has been summoned here by King Badorer himself. He brings Benedict to the tower, where he shows him an ancient tome and a statue. The tome is written in an ancient text, the same that was once used in the kingdom from Brandish 1. It is said that the two kingdoms engaged in trade and had a shared culture before the Brandish 1 kingdom was cursed and sent underground. Anyway, the ancient tome talks of a great power that can grant every wish to its owner, and when that power has been activated, the statue in the tower will begin to glow. And sure enough, the statue is now glowing. Benedict, being a prophet, tells the king that now the power is still underground, but 2 years from now a lone warrior will bring the key to that power to his kingdom, in the form of a sword. The king says thanks for the info, and just to show how evil he is, decides to kill Benedict for good measure, and laughs maniacally about how soon the Planet Buster will be his. So it turns out he knows more than he initially let on. So 2 years later, we come to the present day when our game takes place. Aris has just completed the first game where he brought back the best sword in the game, the Planet Buster from the Underground Kingdom. As he still has a price on his head, he continues to wander from kingdom to kingdom, wherever he can find refuge. He comes to a desert at the border of Bundevia. There he wanders until he finally collapses from exhaustion.
Oh, my kid.
And in the manual it says that just as he collapses, he realizes that the desert was cursed by the king's wizards so that no one can find their way out. And of course we had better talk about the king's men who find him. They're led by a character who has a history with Aris. Even the manual just says they have a history together. Don't ask, I guess. This is Carl. Carl Cares. Okay, it's actually pronounced Caris, but I mean, look, the spelling in the manual is Carl Cares. So, Carl has been sent here by the king to get the Planet Buster from Aris, but while he could just leave him here to die, instead he takes him to the island prison of Balsados. Why? Because Carl cares. Supposedly he does it so that he can settle his score with Aris later, whatever that score might be, but I suspect that secretly he cares. I mean, it's in his name. So as was Falcom's way at the time, after this boring text intro, we get to the awesome part of the opening with great music and graphics. The first one didn't really have this, it just continued the slow music through the second part of the opening. We see this horned lady, who we'll meet later, and also Dela, who you may have noticed hasn't been mentioned so far. The music in this intro is really peak Falcom FM sound. So good. The graphics seem a little slow-moving compared to the music though. I get it, they only had so many graphics and a long intro tune to fill. But in a more modern opening, you would expect to see pacing more like this. Okay, that's enough. We end, as usual in the Brandish games, with the logo and that booming sound, like a mic drop. We are sent back to the menu where we have to select Game Start. So we start out in the prison. The warden says it was built into a natural cave on an island, and that even if you manage to get to the surface, there's no way back to land. So it's like the Brandish version of Alcatraz. They just leave the prisoners to their own means, and they like to take bets on which ones will manage to make it to the surface. Carl tells Aris that if they are fated to fight again, he knows Aris will find his way out. Ah, Carl cares, my friends. Carl cares. So, let's play. First of all, it sure doesn't seem like they expected this cell door to hold. Aris can just punch it open with his bare hands.
How, in the name of Zeus's butthole, did you get out of your cell?
And so we're off. The prison is the perfect first stage of the game, similar to the ruins in the first one. The game won't throw too many tricky puzzles at the player here yet. We mostly just have to explore. Along with the opening theme, the music here is another one of those awesome Falcom FM tracks. Better than anything in the first game, in my opinion anyway. So one change from the first game is that now you have a dedicated equipment menu above your inventory. Anything that allows you to carry more stuff in Brandish is welcome. While you can do the standard sword and shield in your right and left hands, Brandish 2 also has two-handed weapons which require you to de-equip your shield. If you want, you can even dual-wield two single-handed weapons, allowing you to attack faster. Yeah, now that looks pretty awesome. I'm brandishing two swords. Actually though, I maintain that you can't brandish your sword in Brandish, and if you don't believe me, look up the definition. Oh yeah, also you can equip one magic, which will allow you to use it by right-clicking on Aris. Another great thing about the PC versions of Brandish that I didn't mention in my first video is that you can use the number pad as shortcut keys to instantly use any of the items displayed here in your inventory. Now that's honestly a killer feature, missing from all the console Brandish games. One thing new in the sequel is NPCs you can talk to who walk around the playfield. Your fellow prisoners mostly seem to have given up on ever escaping and try to eke out whatever existence they can here. And in fact, on the top floor there's even what the prisoners refer to as a town within the prison, complete with a couple of shops. The shops work just like they do in the first game. Brandish 2 is also where they first added the auto-move function, but it's still a little rough around the edges here in the original release, stopping at even the slightest sign of danger to let the player take over. In the renewal versions, it just goes ahead and takes damage instead of stopping, which honestly makes it more useful in my opinion. There's no point to an autopilot that just stops every 2 seconds. One thing I love about Brandish 2 is the more varied locations it has compared to the first. While each of the different areas of the first one had about 10 floors each, here you only have to get through 4 floors before the prison is over. The transition screen between each area has a new version of the same tune used in the first. Aris is glad to finally see the sky again, but it's a cloudy sky with no warmth of the sun to be felt. His elation at getting out is cut short, however, by the warden and Carl, who've been waiting for him. In fact, the warden thanks Aris because now he's won 5,000 gold thanks to his bet. Carl says that though he and Aris once fought beside each other and they still haven't settled their score, he can't just let him get away. Just what exactly is the history between these two? I guess we'll never know. The warden says if Aris can beat the monster in this enclosure, he's a free man, and he even gives Aris his choice of weapons. Is one of the bosses from the first game, and when Aris of course eventually wins, the warden says that he lied and they're not gonna let him go. And at that moment, who should step in to save the day but Della Delone, or however you pronounce that. Della leads Aris to a cliff where she stops to make sure he knows she didn't come here to save him. Before jumping into the ocean, Aris follows. In the area transition scene, the two of them are on a boat, and Della says Aris really owes her one now. Unfortunately, the tide changes, and instead of heading back to shore, they have no choice but to head to what the locals call the Forgotten Island. There, Della says that she's heard how valuable the Planet Buster is, and she'll have to put their little feud on hold until they can get it back. She'll accept the sword as payment for rescuing him. And since now the tide has returned, Della decides to leave him here to see what Aris can learn on the island. And of course, with Della's luck, she's immediately done in by a kraken. So the next area is the islet, which is a good example of the diverse areas you'll see in Brandish 2. I mean, the first game was all in dark dungeons. We never got to have a stage outside. Unfortunately, it doesn't last very long though, because after we finish exploring the perimeter of the island, we'll find a brick building in the middle. There, Aris finds some bodies, one of which happens to be the prisoner who left all the hints and messages on the walls of the prison. Apparently he escaped, but this is as far as he got. In his final message on the wall, he explains that he was an explorer who came to this land to study an ancient civilization established here long ago by the gods, and which apparently began right here on this island. He theorizes that the island was hidden intentionally by the gods, but why, he wonders, has it become reachable again now? And so, with nowhere else to go, Aris explores the cave below the island. We are back down in the dank dungeon, which, don't get me wrong, is fine. This is what Brandish is all about, after all. And again, this area isn't very long, with only 3 floors. Here we'll find that ancient script translation book, like the one included with the game. You can equip it in one of the other slots, allowing you to read the ancient messages on the walls. And this first one, luckily enough, says that there is a tunnel leading under the ocean, hidden beneath the shrine below. And on the deepest floor of the cave, we'll find that shrine, an eternal flower garden within the cave. It was built to entomb a boy named Adonis, a half-human, half-god who had to be left behind when the gods went home. We don't learn much else from his ghost here, though. So next, Aris is heading through the undersea tunnel, which begins with a single floor called the Ice Zone, followed by 3 floors of Green Zone. And after all that, finally, Aris sees the sky again and has truly won back his freedom. He's in a small fishing village in Bundavia. So one cool thing about Brandish 2 is that there are a couple of actual towns, entire areas with NPCs and shops and no monsters. Here, interestingly, one of the shops is run by a lady from the tower in Brandish 1, who's now married to that warrior we met near the top of the tower. The two of them came to live here after Aris liberated the underground kingdom in Brandish 1. But Aris needs to get the Planet Buster back, so he heads toward the castle and on to Wharf 2, which is another outdoor dungeon area of the game. Here you have to fight the Kraken, and I like to assume it's the same one that attacked Della earlier.
Let loose the Kraken!
Next, Aris reaches the outer walls of the castle, and has to navigate a huge maze of 10 areas known as Castle Walls A through J. Here you can spend all the time you want exploring and mapping out these areas, but ultimately you're just going to find a couple of closed castle gates with no way in, and eventually a castle town. This is the closest thing the game has to a main hub town, and there are a number of things you can do from here. This actually feels a lot like an RPG now. I'm not even sure if the first Brandish is an RPG actually. I mean, the game is pretty linear when it comes down to it, but here Brandish 2 is definitively an action RPG. Here there's even an optional section of the game, a path to a forest which leads to the Ninja Yashiki, Yashiki meaning large house or mansion.
Here come the ninjas.
This is one of the trickiest parts of the game, with a couple of unmarked passages you just have to find by touching the walls. At the end of the second floor, you fight the Ninja Master, and after defeating him, you can pick up one of those interdimensional storage boxes, the main reason you're going to want to go on this whole detour in the first place. But back in town, to progress the main game, what you have to actually do is go to the arena, where you can fight battles to win money. You only need to beat this first battle with the monsters to progress the game, but later on you'll probably also want to fight the second and final battle with a grappler named Umber. She's not Amber, it's Umber. And some of you may know that Umber is one of the playable characters in Brandish 3. What a random way for her to make her first appearance. Surely they knew they were going to do more with this character in the next one. But anyway, after you've beaten at least the first battle in this arena, the mayor comes and asks you to save one of the girls from the town who's been taken to the woods by bandits. And then a new exit from the town opens up, leading to another very short forest section. Here you just need to defeat all the bandits and get the key, so that you can rescue the girl from the building in the center. From the chest here, you can obtain a map of the game, which honestly isn't very useful, but it's still kind of cool to see the layout of Bundavia and your current position in it. Back in town, as thanks, the mayor opens up a secret passage behind one of the houses, which he says leads into the castle. But first it actually takes us to the Dark Zone, a sort of sequel to the Dark Zone in the first game. Here, like in the first one, there's a special set of cursed equipment you should have found by now, which can only be used here and which makes defeating the enemies easy. From there, we're back in castle walls A through J. We can see the area we already explored on the map, but this time we're on the inside of the castle wall instead of the outside. In my opinion, this is where the game really cranks up the difficulty, and the rest of the game is not for casual Brandish players anymore. Not only the enemies and puzzles, but just the whole layout of the game starts to become really difficult to navigate at this point. Each little closed-off section of one of these castle walls leads into another section, and all you can do is explore and hope you stumble upon the way forward eventually. It's a time-consuming section of the game for sure, and the first time I played through this game over 20 years ago, I remember getting hopelessly lost and stuck somewhere right around this point. I think I eventually found a walkthrough to help me out, and this time though I did play through most of the game without one, I ended up using one here just to make this part a little less painful. Anyway, one area you may eventually find is the tower, but you have to actually find your way to the inside of the castle proper first. On the first floor of the castle, we'll meet that horned woman shown in the opening for the first time. Her name is Helen.
30 Helens agree.
If you want to remember something, write it down!
That's what pens are for.
30 Helens agree. Pens are good.
Although pencils are good in case you make a mistake.
She serves under the king, but here she chooses to help Ares for some reason. She tells him that the Planet Buster is in the tower, but in order to get in, he'll need a key hidden somewhere in this castle. She begs Ares to leave the kingdom as soon as he gets the sword back. Another thing we'll find is a stairway guarded by invincible guards, and if we finally give up trying to get past them, Carl comes and tells us that the only place where the guards can be disabled is in the underground laboratory. Why does he tell us this? Of course, because Carl cares. So without any idea where that laboratory is, first all we can do is find the key for the tower here in the castle. And then luckily there's a shortcut from the castle to the tower which can be accessed from the castle side only. The tower in this one is interesting because on the inside it looks pretty industrial, but the roof outside has a Japanese design. You'll have a tough time navigating these rooftop sections and avoiding winds that will blow you back down to the lower floors. And the difficult thing about being taken down a floor in the Brandish games, which I'm not sure I mentioned in my first video, is that the game auto-saves whenever you go up or down a floor. So there's no saving and loading your way out of this. If you fall, you've got to walk all the way back up. Anyway, the tower only has 5 floors, plus the top of tower. On the 5th, we'll meet the ghost of the prophet Benedict, who tells Ares that the sword he brought back from the previous adventure is not just a sword. It's a key which can unlock both infinite power and infinite disaster. Ares, he says, has a responsibility for awakening the sword. And at the top of the tower, we find the Planet Buster plugged into that glowing statue mentioned in the opening story. Ares can feel an awesome power emanating from it, and hears Benedict's voice tell him that now there's no one who can wield the sword, or at least not without a special shield and armor hidden somewhere in the kingdom. But nevertheless, Ares takes the Planet Buster. Outside, Della tells Ares to hand it over with a blank stare. They fight, and if you manage to defeat Della, a cloud of smoke wafts up from her body, and a voice invites Arius to fight him in his own body next. And so he can fall down 2 floors and fight the Soul Master. He's not very important to the story, so let's just beat him and move on. From there, we find a pentagram, which warps us to the prison from the beginning of the game, of all places. And for the first time, we can explore the above-ground section here, where Della and Aris made their daring escape earlier. There we can now find the elevator key, which will allow us to travel instantly between all levels of the prison we explored earlier. And from floor B3, now we can get into the laboratory. It's 4 difficult floors to get through, and on the final floor there's a conveyor belt where it's possible to softlock the game on the other side if you don't happen to have a sledgehammer to break this wall. For the renewal version, they added a sledgehammer you can pick up here in order to fix this. Still, there are other parts where you can softlock that were just left in. Don't worry though, if you just play the game normally, you probably won't encounter any softlocks. On this same floor, you'll find a couple of levers, one which disables those invincible guards in the castle, and another which unlocks the boss you'll have to fight here. That boss, it says, looks just like the cursed king we fought at the end of Brandish 1. And so, yeah, we have to refight the end boss of the first game. The speed and everything seems maybe a little less crazy here, but it's still plenty hard and takes a lot of effort and saving and loading to beat. Afterward, conveniently, there's a pentagram that warps us back to the castle, right in front of the room with the guards we couldn't get past earlier. Now they're easy to defeat. The stairway here leads right into the throne room of the castle, where we find only Helen, who's disappointed Aris didn't just take the sword and leave, but understands now that maybe there are some fates that can't be avoided. Moving on through the pentagram warp here, now we find ourselves in an area of the dark zone we couldn't get to earlier. Man, it seems like this game should be winding down by about now, but there's still more. From here we can find a passage back into the previous section of Dark Zone 1, giving us an easy way back to the castle town if we want to resupply or go back to the previous parts of the game. Man, this game is connected together like a mess of spaghetti wires. Anyway, from here now we can get into Dark Zone 2, which then leads into the fortress. Here with a whopping 9 floors, this feels a lot like something from the first game. At least the scenery does change partway through. On the 3rd floor we get that shield we'll need to equip, the Planet Buster. And on the 6th we meet Della, in the one meeting that feels a lot like something from the first game. She tells Aris to hand over the sword again, only to step on a warp, which leads to an endless chain of warps. There must be a switch to stop it, she says, as she starts to get dizzy. We do manage to stop it, but Della passes out, and we can grab a key off her to proceed forward. And on the 9th and final floor, we'll get the armor we also need to equip the Planet Buster. We hear an evil voice representing the power awakened by the sword. He'll warp us all the way back to the prison just to show how powerful he is and how weak and helpless Aris is. But what is he talking about? This is exactly where we need to be, cause next he opens up a hole here into the nucleus, the true final area of the game with 3 floors. You can even now use the elevator to go between the nucleus and the prison to get back to the rest of the game. The nucleus, of course, is a tough and tricky area, but now with the Planet Buster equipped, the enemies are relatively easy to take down. I guess here's where I'll put a spoiler warning for the ending of the game. From the nucleus, there's an area called the Backbone, where we'll have the final showdown with Carl, before which he lets us know that the reason the weather is now always terrible in Bundavia is because of all the weird experiments the king is doing in the laboratory. Why does he bother telling us this? Because Carl cares. The winner of their duel, he says, will take on King Badorur, cause though he works for him, he doesn't really like him much either, and knows he needs to be stopped. It's pretty hard to hit Carl on his horse. His second phase on foot is a bit easier. Carl says that Helen can tell us now how to beat the king. He dies, I guess, disappearing and leaving behind a key.
Bye, Carl. I'm gonna miss you.
Too bad. He and Helen could have made good playable characters in Brandish 3. Helen says she'll give Aris an ancient stone which can stop the evil power awakened by the Planet Buster. Aris recognizes her sad expression from somewhere before. It's Adonis, the boy whose grave we found in the underground garden. Aris seems to hear Adonis's voice in his head, and he explains that after thousands of years being left behind by the gods and trapped on the island, he became a vengeful spirit, and it was those negative emotions, he thinks, that brought conflict and indeed gave rise to ruthless rulers like King Badoror in this land. But once every 1,000 years, his spirit is able to be reborn as a human. When Helen realized that she had the spirit of Adonis within her, she began working to bring an end to the sins brought about by Adonis's spirit. She says her body is no longer needed in this world, and she will now return to where she belongs, along with Carl. She disappears and leaves that stone we need to defeat the king. But before the showdown with the king, we have one more meeting with Della, who is now pissed off at the king and for some reason thinks she's going to be the one this time to defeat the end boss and get all the glory. But it doesn't take long for her to realize that her magic has no effect and that she's totally outmatched. And so the end boss seems difficult, though not too bad for the first phase. But man, the second one is something else. This is even harder than the end boss of the first one, and takes some serious keyboard skills to do well. Keyboard skills which I don't quite have. Still, I eventually persevered through luck, and of course by saving partway through the battle multiple times after managing to get in a few good hits and getting out of the way. If you can land the final blow, it goes right into the ending. Dela comments that Bundevia ended up just like the kingdom in the first game. Aris, she says, has a habit of bringing misfortune to every country he visits. She of course tells Aris to hand over the sword, which surprisingly Aris does without hesitation. I don't know if he knew this was going to happen, but the sword immediately crumbles, having served its purpose, I guess. Of course, this is somehow Aris's fault, and she chases after him angrily. That shit-eating grin on Aris's face as he rides away is priceless. That shop owner couple from the first game are the only other characters to make an appearance. In the credits this time, they actually list an entire 6 names of individual composers under Falcom Sound Team JDK, and here Yoshio Kiya actually gets a directing credit instead of being left out entirely. Afterward, like in the first game, you get a list of your final stats, total kills, playtime, etc. For the renewal version, they added your map completion, which according to this site listing all the differences, is the killer feature which makes the renewal version worth the money, even if you already own the original. Yeah, I can see how for completionists that would be important, but for me, I'm just happy to be able to get through these Brandish games at all. Brandish 2 was the last Brandish game to get a Super Famicom port, and as mentioned earlier, there's an English patch that's been available for decades. I think I like the way Koei ported this one over more than the first. The auto map is displayed on screen at all times, and they even added mouse support. However, in order to make the game fit into a 24 megabit cartridge, they changed the dungeon layouts and the number of floors pretty dramatically. For instance, the prison now only has 2 floors plus the above ground part, and instead of 10 castle wall maps, there are only 4. This could be a good thing though if you want to play an easier and more manageable version of the game. Like I said, the PC-98 version can get pretty ridiculous, and according to some players, the tempo and pacing of the adventure are actually better in the Super Famicom version. So take your pick, I guess. Either the more complete game on the 98 or the short and sweet version here. On the Super Famicom, there was also Brandish 2 Expert, which has adjustable difficulty and a time attack mode that gets unlocked by either completing the game or by using a code. There is no English patch though for this version. And like the first game, there is a Korean MS-DOS port. And there isn't much to say about it since it's almost exactly the same as the PC-98 version, but with Sound Blaster music. They did censor the female monsters in this shot with these bats. I guess that's something. Play this version if you can read Korean, I guess. Brandish 2 is everything you could want from a sequel. It's longer, has more diverse locations, a better, more expansive soundtrack, a more detailed story, and it changed the game into more of an RPG with towns and an interconnected, non-linear world. It is also a lot more confusing and difficult, which is definitely not a deal breaker for me, but it may turn some players off. Even if the difficulty scares you, I would recommend giving it a try, at least for the earlier sections of the game. Because Brandish 2 is awesome. It's even better than the first. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-98 Paradise. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of this PC-98 Brandish journey. Brandish 3 is the fan favorite, and an absolute PC-98 classic, so hopefully I'll get to it soon. Until then, an extra huge thanks goes to all the patrons and members scrolling by, and thanks to everyone for watching. See you next time.